as you know, at Leadville, there's a lot of kind of washboard sections.
Yeah.
And I think that high volume and low pressure is going to be pretty key for that kind of thing, just to keep you comfortable and keep you less fatigued. I think a good formula that I've always used is to take your body weight and divide it by 7.
Oh, really?
And then
that's cool.
That gives you a PSI, and you can either add or subtract a PSI or 2 from there.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country.
And possibly the world.
I would tend to agree. On this show, wheels and tires, we set you straight on the most asked about part of the Leadville bike setup, the rolling parts. We brought in a couple of our friends from ENVE, both of them Leadville veterans, each with finish times around 7 hours, 30 minutes, to geek out about rims, tires, sealant, and air pressure.
Yeah, since the first time I did this race, Hadi, the tires and air pressure question in particular has been a big topic. Back then, I was sure that 50 PSI and practically bald tires on the absolute lightest possible wheels was the answer to this question. The conversation I had with the ENVE guys shows the world has moved on and changed, definitely for the better. Another thing that's changed, for me at least, is my age. When I first did the Leadville 100, I was 31, if you can believe it, just a babe. This year, I'll be racing at age 52. The questions for the Queen segment, I will be asking about how age impacts this race. She's closing in on 50 herself. Whether you're age 22, the age my daughter is doing the Leadman this year, or 52, that's me, Rebecca Rush has some great practical advice for you.
But it almost doesn't even matter what we talk about in the rest of this episode, Fatty, because we'll also be talking about the part of the course everyone obsesses about, one of the true defining moments of the Leadville 100, the climb to Columbine Mine along with the return.
Yeah, and that's not even everything. We'll be talking with Jonathan Lee of Trainer Road about how to come back from a setback, like the cold I've obviously been fighting for the last couple of episodes, as well as an unfortunate inevitability of cycling, the occasional injury.
Yep, seriously packed show here today, folks. I am Michael Houghton. Some people call me Hottie. 6-time attendee, 5-time starter, 4-time finisher of the Leadville Trail 100. You're also hearing Eldon Fatty Nelson, who is going for his 21st Leadville Trail 100 finish. He is one of 8 people in the world to complete the LT 100 20 times. He's also one of 3 people who have been on this show and also appeared in one or both of the Race Across the Sky movies. What a connection.
Wow.
I own both, Fatty, both the Race Across the Sky movies, and I can't say with certainty which one you were in, but I'm pretty sure it was the first.
No, it was actually the second one. I was in the 2010 one with Levi Leipheimer.
Okay, and you and I actually have never discussed the Race Across the Sky movies. How was it you became a cast member?
I don't know. It's never even occurred to me to ask that question. They just called me, and I said, sure. You know, I am all for self-promotion. For me, it just meant really standing for an hour in front of a building, feeling kind of awkward and weird, and then talking endlessly, as I am very comfortable with doing, about this race. Really, it was kind of like a very short version of this podcast, but with pictures. Sadly, my acting career never really took off, and this is one of only 2 entries I have in IMDb. For the record, I also play a bike messenger in one episode of the TV show Leverage. I still get checks for about $50 twice a year for that one.
I love your appearance in the Race Across the Sky movie, and I always remember you talking about counting the number of flats you see as you go down the power line climb. That's your kind of your moment there, I think. in the Race Across the Sky movie. You're going to hear me say this. I've said it before. I'll say it again probably on this show. If you're looking for course recon, first, listen to the show because we do a good job of breaking down the course. But also, get your hands on Race Across the Sky, 2009, 2010 editions. They'll show you pictures of the course, how it's laid out, how to race it, where the climbs are, where the tough parts are. And you get some great stories, too. One of them from our very own Eldon Fatty Nelson. The Leadville podcast is sponsored by thefeed.com. Fatty, I tried a new oatmeal recipe this week. Oh, you're going to love this. Carrot cake oats. All right? Shredded carrot, a little orange peel, cinnamon, ginger, cooked in steel oats. It didn't really work. Didn't ruin my rye, but it didn't help it either. Point being, Fatty, you don't want to take risks with food, especially the stuff you plan on eating during your ride.
I'm a little bit disappointed because I don't think I have ever told you or very many people this, but carrot cake is my favorite kind of cake. So I would have been excited about your recipe if it had worked. But your underlying point that you don't want to go experimenting is a very crucial one. This, as well as others, is a really important part of the course that we're going to discuss today. While you eat and drink, more to the point, whether you eat or drink on the Columbine Mine climb pretty much determines how you're going to do for the rest of this race. It is not a time you can chew. At least I can't. Things like waffles just sort of fall out of my mouth dry and unswallowed. It's all about drinking high-calorie drinks and squeezing gels into my mouth and just, basically getting it down my throat. And the less time I have to spend with food in my mouth, the better. Whatever you're eating or drinking the rest of the race, I really strongly recommend you try out Morton Energy Drink and get comfortable with it for use during the Columbine Mine climb. Furthermore, I say find out what flavors of Goo Roctane Gel work best for you and use those too. It's not easy no matter what to stay ahead of the food game during this part of the race, but between these two products, both of which come in the Leadville training and racing packs from the feed, I plan to do it. And our listeners can too.
That's right. Our podcast listeners can get a great price on the training and racing packs custom curated for Leadville racers. Go to thefeed.com/Leadville for the race pack. And there's a link on that page to go to the training pack. And be sure to use the code Leadville15 for a 15% discount on either of those boxes.
Yeah, here's something new too. You can also use that Leadville15 code anytime you're buying any amount of that Morton drink mix. So if you're buying one of our training or racing boxes or not, you can still use that code when buying Morton and get a really nice 15% discount. Again, thefeed.com/Leadville and use that Leadville15 code at checkout.
And now onto the course. Each show, we are discussing a segment of the Leadville Out and Back. We're doing the course in order. We have reached now the chaos that is Twin Lakes.
Yeah, and the temptation right now is to deep dive into what happens here at this 40-mile aid station, because this is where people set up the crewing headquarters. But we're going to resist that temptation, at least for today, because crewing is too important a part of the Leadville experience to just shoehorn into this segment. We're going to have a complete feature in a future episode to talk about strategy and tactics for crewing. I promise you, whoever you have crewing, you're going to want to have them listen to all of that. I will say one thing in the meantime. I really recommend a Camelback for this part of the race. And I really recommend you put something in that Camelback, the Camelback bladder, that will get you your hydration and your calories. I'm for myself, I'm going to be using a liter of the Morton 320 drink mix. There's a reality to Leadville most people don't talk about because it isn't pretty. When you're racing to 9,000 to 12,000 feet, you breathe so fast. Chewing becomes a real problem. You have a hard time working up enough saliva to swallow dry food like waffles or sandwiches. And this is even more true during that climb up Columbine. For my first 15 years, I did not figure this out. And as a result, I didn't get enough down my throat And I felt fine during the climb up Columbine. It didn't even occur to me that I was digging a pit for myself. As a result, this kind of thinking doesn't become apparent until you try to start putting some power to the pedals coming out of Twin Lakes Dam inbound at around mile 60 and find out that you got nothing in the tank. So for this segment, gels or Martin 320 or both, I'm personally going to have a liter of Morton 320. That's 640 calories in a Camelback Chase vest, and I'm going to be nursing that constantly. That's all the calories I will need to get back to Twin Lakes Dam, 22 miles, and what feels like several hours from now.
Yeah, ditto on that. I mean, at Twin Lakes, I would just empty my pockets of all the solid foods, put a fresh bottle on board, at least fresh, one big bottle and probably a small bottle in the cage. And then in my pockets, choose, blocks of some sort and some other gel or something else I could gulp down pretty easy so I could take that in while climbing, which can be difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, we're going to dig more into the crewing question at the Twin Lakes Dam, whether or not you want to use the alternate feed zone or the main dam. We'll get into all that. But for now, we're just going to roll on through and talk about a little climb called the Columbine. Fatty, I'm kind of stuck between not wanting to freak people out about this climb and really wanting to freak people out about this climb. I mean, I know that it isn't truly the hardest part of the day, but on the other hand, it sure can be. There's a little bit of a rolling of the dice with this climb if you're not already familiar with how you react to a big climb after you've got 40 miles of racing in your legs, or how you react to making a jump from 9,200 feet at the dam to 12,600 at the summit. You should know, however, that very few people come down from this mountain without more respect with it than when they started that climb. And with that ominous statement, look, this is a show that freaks you out about the Leadville 100.
That's why we're here.
Let's go into detail, Fatty, about the Columbine climb.
Okay, so we're going to start with an overview of what you're going to be doing here. From Twin Lakes Dam to Columbine Mine turnaround, you're riding just 10 miles. That's all we're talking about today, mile 41 to 51. Note that is the turnaround is at 51. You don't turn around at mile 50, so don't be looking for that on your computer. It's 51. And that's why, the race goes 103 miles. And you're climbing around 3,500 feet total. Depending on where you live, that may sound like a lot of climbing in 10 miles, or it may sound like a normal day. If you look at anyone's Strava around where I live, for example, there are very few weekday mountain bike rides that don't have this much climbing. But this is different, whether you do a lot of climbing or a little, because that 3,500 feet of climbing here in Leadville, where it's taking you, is crazy. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. I'm breaking this 10 miles into 3 mental segments whenever I do this part of the course. The first 2 miles and change has you rolling, not too hard. Then you've got 5 miles or so of wide dirt road grinding, just sort of breaking you out of tree line. Then 2 miles of hard climbing, meaning you're off your bike sometimes and doing a little bit of pushing. And that brings you to the mostly flat final half mile to the turnaround at that aforementioned 51 mile point. So just summing it up, roll 2.5, grind up 5, granny gear and push for 2, and a flat half to the turnaround. That's the overview, but it doesn't really even come close to telling the story. Let's sort of dig into the details of that climb, Hottie.
Yeah, let's do. In that first 2.5 miles of rolling, there are 2 or 3 short but steep grunts. Nothing particularly memorable here. Then, right around mile 43, you'll come to an alternate crewing spot, a mini chaos alley of sorts, which we'll talk about in our upcoming crew special. For now, just know that as you come out of this at the end, you'll see where our good friend of the pod, this pod, Dirty Kansas champ and alum and goo guy, Yuri Oswald, will have his goo sprinter van. So what you'll come out of the alternate feed zone, you'll make a right onto a wide gravel road, and as you start climbing towards the big hill, right at the top there, you're going to see Yuri Oswald, guarantee you. Give him a high five, he might give you a gel, I guarantee it'll be a goo.
Yep. And I always ask for a push, too, but he never gives me one. He has given me a bottle of Roctane once, though, which saved my bacon. I forgot to get a bottle coming from my own crew, and so I had something to drink on the way up the up the Columbine climb. That would have been a real problem otherwise.
Yep. Once you've said goodbye to Uri, right around mile 43 and a half into the race, you're saying hello to the Columbine Mine climb. This is the main part of the climb. There's a bending left turn and sudden steepening of the road that lets you know, in no uncertain terms, the challenge is on. The first quarter mile will catch you off guard. It is hard. It's demoralizing.
Yeah, it is. I have a little tip on that. I've learned from doing this race and watching those around me so many times, Hottie. A lot of people get so beaten down by this tough climb, they settle into a super low gear and start riding in sort of a survival mode, as if the entirety of the Columbine Mine climb is going to be steep like this first quarter mile. But it isn't. When the road goes by a little camping area, it's a sign to you. You are past the worst of it, at least for a little while. Assess where you are, how your legs are feeling, what you're capable of, and think about all those matches that you've been saving up, the matches we've been telling you not to burn. Now's the time when it's time, then it might be okay to start burning some of those matches because you were in one of the iconic places of this race. Clear up to mile 49, you're just going to be grinding uphill on dirt road. It's more or less a good place for you to sort of turn off your brain and ride with purpose for a while.
Hey, but keep your wits about you here, too. There are about 4 things you need to keep in mind as you churn up the mountain toward the Columbine Mine turnaround. First, stay on the very far right side of this road. This is absolutely critical because before you know it, there are going to be racers coming down the other side of the road, and they'll be flying. I mean, we're talking about 30 to 40 miles an hour easy. So while there's a temptation to weave your way up this big, wide dirt road, maybe doing a paper boy, don't do that. Don't do it. Ride single file, except when you're passing, and keep those passes quick. I remember guys are becoming, and ladies are becoming flying down the hill here.
Oh, they are. And it's a real pleasure. It's one of the things I love about this race is you're doing this race, and you also have a really good front row seat of how the elite are doing in this race. So the second thing that kind of goes along with this, although it's not life and death like your point, Hottie, is a cultural thing with Leadville and a tradition I really like. Cheer for some of those riders as they're going downhill. Obviously, you can't cheer for everyone because air is precious up there, and you kind of need to keep some of it for yourself. But every once in a while, yell some encouragement. That's sort of a Dave Wiens legacy. Through his entire reign on this mountain, as he was barreling down at near speed of sound velocity, he would holler for riders who were coming up to the mine as he blasted down. It was really awesome and something that I think is a great thing to kind of keep going with.
Yeah, it's definitely a much-needed boost. You'll get a little pump from the guys who are in the lead because you'll hear them yelling at you, go guys, they will. They'll give you encouragement. It's kind of the understood rule there on the Columbine Mine climb.
Yeah.
The third thing to keep in mind, or in your head that is to eat. It is so hard as the air gets thinner and you're working harder to go slower than you've ever gone before. You just don't feel like eating at all. So do yourself a favor and commit to an eating schedule, like a gel every half hour, sips on an energy drink constantly. If you don't fuel here and now, you're going to pay the price later in the Leadville Trail 100.
Yeah, that is honestly the most important learning I figured out a few years ago after 15 years of bonking at around mile 60 because I just didn't eat during the Columbine climb. I'd get to the top of the Columbine and I wouldn't want to eat on the way down because it's tough to eat on the descent. And then after basically taking in no calories for more than 2 hours, I'd wonder why I bonked at mile 60 every year.
Yeah, you can't eat on that descent, so you've got to eat going up. Eat now or bonk later. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
And speaking of bonks, during this climb, you'll probably feel like you're bonking. Your legs will lose power. Your mind clouds up. You just won't believe how slow and how weak you feel. But you are not bonking. That's the altitude. Remember from episode 4 this season when Dr. Grissom was saying that for every 1,000 feet you climb at this altitude, there's a compounding effect on you.
Yeah.
That how much the change from 9 to 10,000 feet hits you isn't the same as how much it will later hit you from 10 to 11,000 feet.
Yeah. As you're going up, you've got to tell yourself, this isn't me. I'm not falling apart. My race isn't over. This is the altitude, and everyone is experiencing it. This weird fake bonk is what you paid for. It was the $450 check that you wrote back in January or whenever. Don't be demoralized. Just plug along the best you can. You're not going to be up here forever. And as you keep eating and drinking, your power is going to come back to you once you get off this mountain. Strongly recommend go back and listen to episode 4 this season. What Dr. Grissom said is, it's words of wisdom, and it is something you should keep in mind as you are beginning to despair going up Columbine Mine.
Yeah, it's just so easy to let this part of the race get in your head, but you don't have to. Mm-hmm. You just need to realize you're now, quote unquote, enjoying what makes this race so famous. One thing you will have to do at around mile 49 when you break through the tree line is get off your bike from time to time, 3 or 4 times for most people, and push that thing uphill in steep, loose, rocky double track. For this reason, shoe choice matters. So as part of your training in the next week or so, go find a steep trail, even if it's one you normally ride and clean, and push your bike up it for a few minutes. Get a sense of how your shoes do while hike-a-biking. And then find a good, comfortable position for how you handle your bike when you're off of it. Mm-hmm. Columbine is not the only place you'll need this tactic, so it's worth getting ready for.
Yeah, you're going to need that tactic again when you're going up the power line, that is for sure. Mm-hmm. For all of these hike-a-bike sections, it's even more important than before to stay on the right side of the trail, because now you're on narrow double track and there are more people coming down, and they are just as tired and barely lucid as you are. Encourage them if you can, and don't be resentful if they don't say anything back, because they are probably just as being as focused as they can on not creaming you. And besides, it'll be your turn to be yelling encouragement at folks as you come down soon enough. And one last thing on these hike-a-bike sections. It takes a real force of will to not go into sort of a self-pitying survival mode. A lot of people who've been racing fast and hard are going to slow to a crawl. One thing Reba Rush hammered into my head during some of the clinics I took from her during, in the weeks before this race, is this is still part of the race. Walk with power, walk with purpose. If the person in front of you is defeated, ask them to let you by. You are racing. This is what you signed up for. Make yourself proud here. Okay, lecture over. The serious climbing for Columbine Mine ends at about mile 50, and you've got a few rocky but flat few minutes to compose yourself, even as you pick your line around and through mud puddles and embedded rocks.
Then, amazingly, you actually go downhill for a few seconds, meaning you roll fast into the Columbine Mine aid station. You're at mile 51 now. The Columbine Mine. You've done it. You're halfway there. Now's a good time to take a look at your bike, computer, make sure, because most people find your turnaround time is a good predictor of your finishing time. The halfway point in distance is also very close to the halfway point in time for this race. Remember, though, this is an accomplishment. It's not the end of the race.
No.
You should not spend a lot of time here if you can help it. And whether it's a good idea to stop at the mine at all is a hotly debated topic.
Yeah. Put me down on the don't stop unless you need food, water, or clothing side of this debate, Hottie. You are not going to catch your breath at 12,600 feet. And if you sit around for long, your legs are going to stiffen up, and then you turn around and you go up that little kicker of an uphill, and it turns into a real nasty surprise. I don't know if you have ever done that, but I've stopped and eaten like my fill of cantaloupe there at that aid station before, and it's so delicious, and I was so grateful for the break. And then I started riding again, and it felt like it felt like this impossibly steep little kicker of a climb. It's better just to get that thing over with.
Yeah, I agree. Make the turnaround, and if you do need to stop while you're on the top of the mountain, climb back out of the mine aid station area, and you'll be on top of a little crest, and there, you have to take a leak, you want to do a gel, and you need to stop to do any of that. You can stop up there, and then that'll lead you into the Columbine descent. So do what you got to do. But I would say roll through that aid station if you can. Fatty, I do have one question for you regarding Columbine.
Yeah.
Do you ride Columbine before race day, and what do you tell others about doing that?
I have in the past. Actually, my best time up Columbine was on, I think, the week before. In order to avoid doing too much, I would not do it more any closer than 3 days before the race, and probably 4 or 5. Also, I think there is a psychological issue with doing that climb before, because you do the climb and you say to yourself, this isn't so bad. And then, because I have done Columbine and just cleaned it, where I didn't have to walk a single inch of the thing a week before the race. And I was like, well, this is, everyone makes such a big deal of this, and I'm super strong, and this is easy. And then I didn't give it the respect it deserved on race day. And I find myself pushing, and I think something is wrong, and I'm not thinking until too late about the fact that it is a very different thing to be doing Columbine Mine with 40 miles of racing in your legs than doing it when you're completely fresh, and that's the only thing you're riding that day. How about you?
Yeah, I have never climbed Columbine in preparation for the race, and I tell others it's really not necessarily. It's just a long climb. You're going to slog up it. Watch the video. You'll get to know what it's about. If you do absolutely have to go up that thing for peace of mind or whatever, drive. Get in a car. You can drive a lot of the way up that thing.
Yeah.
Take your bike with you. Get off where they make you get off. I think it's right where you come out of the trees. Right where it turns to the narrow double track, and you can ride the rest of the section. But save your legs for race day.
Yeah.
That climb will take a lot out of you, even if it's the only thing you do in a day.
Yeah. I will say that it is really nice to go to the top of the Columbine Mine on a day when you are not racing, because on race day, you don't get a chance to look over the other side of that mountain, and it is a remarkable view. It is really worth seeing, to see that little cabin, that broken down ruin of a cabin that is there, and then walk a few steps and look down the flip side of that mountain. It is an incredibly gorgeous mountain range and is worth taking a look at, but not on race day. On race day, you just want to get down.
And, of course, going down, you can't see anything either, other than the trees blitzing by your peripheral vision, which is what we'll take on next time, the descent of Columbine, when we revisit the course. The Leadville podcast is brought to you by Shimano. Last show was our gear blowout special. We went off on all things bike. It got a little ridiculous, and really we had to stop ourselves. But look, bike setup is a major part of this thing. And Fatty, no matter what frame you ride, wheels you spin, tires you roll, if it's being shifted and stopped by Shimano, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, you definitely are. That's been my experience. With all that, one thing we didn't talk about, Hottie, is brakes. We went for so long that we were kind of like looking at our watches and each other, and it's like, okay, we better cut it. And we didn't talk about brakes. And that's a shame, because disc brakes are one of the things that Shimano has really gotten right. And that's not me just promoting a sponsor either. If you go back and look at the photos from years when other component companies have sponsored me, and you take a good close look at my brakes, you will see that they are always Shimano. Always. And in fact, they're pretty much always Shimano XTR, just because I'm a gear snob. But this year, Shimano asked me to put XT on my bike because they wanted to see whether I like them as much as I do my XTR brakes. And you know what? Every bit as good. In fact, my wife makes the argument that they are better, but That's because this is the first time she's owned a new set of brakes. Don't tell her that. Up until now, I've always just given her my hand-me-downs.
Yeah, every time I've talked to bike mechanics about what brakes to get, hey, what brakes should I get? The first thing out of their mouth, Shimano XT, just get them. They're reliable. You'll love them. They stop great. And Shimano has the fabulous Ice Tech rotors. These things are great. I'm actually running them in combination with some other brands' brakes, and they do a great job. So the Ice Tech rotors, along with the XT calipers and levers, you're going to be in good shape no matter how fast you're going off the Columbine Mine.
All right, so we'll just leave it with that and say go to bike.shimano.com, bike.shimano.com for more. We keep saying Bike Shimano, but it's bike.shimano.com for more. I don't know where we've been sending people, Hottie. We're also going to have a link to that in our show notes at leadville100podcast.com.
It is your women's champion, Rebecca Rush from Ketchum, Idaho. Welcome back, Rebecca.
Okay, Fatty, the four-time LT100 champ and DKXL winner, something no other woman can say, Rebecca Rush is standing by.
Reba, welcome back to Questions for the Queen.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
It's so good to have you here. I learn so much from you every time. I feel like such a fanboy.
You've done Leadville, though, way more times than I have. So
I have. And
yeah.
That said, I think that everyone can learn things from everyone. And I certainly learn a lot from you. Now, you and I have both done this race a fair number of times, and you and I have both been doing all kinds of endurance events for a pretty good period of time. And that leads us to the questions that I have for today. There are a lot of different ages out there on the course, from late teens to late 70s. I, for example, am a much different person than I was when I first raced the Leadville 100. I was 31 then, and I'm 52 now. And your endurance racing career, across multiple sports has also covered multiple decades.
Yeah, from high school, really, is when I started, cross-country running. So you're a much different person now. Your mind is tougher. You have decades of experience that you've earned into your body. But are there different race strategies that you would recommend for different ages? That's the awesome thing about endurance sports is that you kind of get better, like a fine wine. You do get better as you age because you get the experience, you get the knowledge. There's so much that goes into endurance athletics that is not just sheer power and fitness. There's so many other things. It's kind of like, I wish I knew then what I know now. I think youth is wasted on the young, and you've got this, firing muscles and all this amazing physiology, in your 20s, but you don't have the knowledge and experience. And we talked a little bit already about how powerful your brain is. And so it is kind of exciting to know that you can get faster as you age. And I've definitely seen that with, better power numbers, better endurance. I'm 49 and I just won a race against a whole bunch of 20-somethings and 30-somethings, which is pretty awesome to know that. So that's one great thing. It's good news for people that, there's plenty of time to continue to bike race. But there are some differences, physiological differences that we have to think about. And really what I've noticed, other than I need reading glasses now and I use a larger Garmin than I used to use the little tiny one, and I use the 1030 now. But really what I've noticed is there's pacing differences. And I think for the young people that are coming into endurance events, it's really exciting to see young people wanting to do endurance events, first of all. But I think some of the strategy that the young kids really need to think about is pacing and being patient, because that's not necessarily their forte yet. They're like a colt with all this power and energy, but no focus and sort of no harness on their energy. And so my advice for somebody new coming into endurance sports is to look towards someone a little more experienced and perhaps pace off them and kind of hold back a little bit. I sort of have a 25%
rule when I tell people, and a lot of people do this, not just young folks, but take the first 25% of the race conservatively. And then after that, okay, maybe ramp it up a little for the next 25% and conservatively the next 25. And then the last 25, empty the tank. But really holding back for that first, hour and a half of the race, I think is something that's harder for some of the younger athletes who haven't really learned that kind of pacing. And, they feel like $1,000,000 at the start line, but knowing that 8, 9, 10 hours later, what you're going to feel like is going to be quite different. And for the older athletes, really relishing in the fact that you have years of training in your legs, you have the training knowledge, you're smarter than those young kids because you've learned a lot of stuff. And this is kind of what happened to me when I got a coach, I got a heart rate monitor, I got a power meter. I was like, wow, okay, I've learned a lot. And that really did help me and has continued to help me perform, almost into my 50s now. And I have a lot more experience about recovery and nutrition, and those things work. And so for the older athletes out there is really maximizing your efficiencies in that area. And I was thinking about this when I was racing the Dirty Kansas 350. I didn't go in, as trained as I would have liked to. But I kept telling myself, I've got years of endurance in my legs. I know what this feels like. I know how to pace. And I kept telling myself, don't try harder, try better, because I knew I couldn't fall back on sheer fitness and training because I hadn't done it. I hadn't done my homework. And so I had to really maximize the other things and be really good about pedal stroke, how I'm sitting on the bike, how I'm eating. And I won the race, by a lot. And it's not because I was fit and ready for it. It's because I really tried better, not harder. And so for the older athletes, you may not have the sheer power that you had when you were 25, but you have so many other tools in the shed to access. And so that's my advice, for the older athletes, is to really maximize that experience and knowledge.
Yeah. And I would add to that, don't let your age be a bugaboo for you, regardless of whether you are very young or very old. I have been passed by people who are half my age, and I've been passed by people who are decades older than I am, both in the Leadville 100. Your age almost becomes a non-factor if you are riding smart and riding at your ability. So use that. Don't let it slow you down in either direction. It's
a great equalizer. Endurance racing
Truly.
Is a fantastic equalizer there really isn't, and you see Diana Nyad is, holds all these endurance. She's an endurance swimmer in her 60s. And she's had her best performances and records in her 60s than the rest of her life.
I wanted to go to Bike Fit, though.
Yeah.
As you've been racing for a couple of decades now, have you noticed Bike Fit difference?
Absolutely. And that's a super good question. One, I cannot stress enough how important it is for everyone to get a Bike Fit. You hear a lot of people, especially when they come in new into cycling, they're like, oh, my butt hurts or my back hurts or this hurts. And, I don't want to do it. If things are hurting that really aren't your legs, that lactic acid in your legs, if there's other body parts that are hurting, you're not doing it right. And it just means you don't have a good Bike Fit because you shouldn't be getting back pain or, numbness in your hands or things like that. And really, that can all be alleviated with a good Bike Fit and the right equipment, the right shoes, the right saddle, the right padding on your handlebars, and learning the position on the bike. And, my Bike Fit has changed, but also I think as an industry, Bike Fits have changed. I mean, you can look at like old race pictures, even, as early as 2000 or as 2000, recently as 2000, where the cross-country racers are all on really skinny, narrow handlebars, really low front end, their saddle's really high and their handlebars really low. And even the pro athletes are changing. And so Bike Fits are becoming more upright for people as the geometry of the bikes change. You don't have to like crank yourself down over the front tire so much. So bike geometry is changing and making it more comfortable to ride because the bikes are just designed better. I also think people are starting to realize, a wider handlebar is more comfortable. And if it's more comfortable, I can ride it longer, which means I'm going to ride faster and be more efficient because I am comfortable. And so don't let anyone tell you, how your bike should be set up. It should be set up for you that if it's comfortable, it's fast. And if it hurts you and you're in pain, then it's not going to be very fast and it's not going to be very fun. What has changed for me for bike fit is, as we age, we get a little bit less flexible in our hamstrings and our lower back, or you start to have injuries that have piled up, or your shoulders are a little different than they used to be. And it doesn't mean you can't ride and be fast and fit. It just means you need to accommodate for those body changes as we fall down or crash or do whatever. I mean, one thing as I age, I do have to stretch more. It doesn't mean get a bike fit so you don't have to stretch. That's not what I'm saying. But our bodies do change, absolutely, and our weight gets distributed differently. It's also if you wear a camelback or don't wear a camelback. That changes things on your bike, and people don't always consider, like for Dirty Kansas and doing bike packing, that's a little bit different fit for me and more upright than it would be if I was doing a 2-hour cross-country race.
Yeah.
So things have changed, and I'll also let people know, for the experienced cyclists, you're like, oh, I got a bike fit, I know my numbers, and I'll be like, well, when did you last get it? And you're like, oh, 10 years ago, but I know that this is my, stack height and seat height and this and that, and I encourage those riders, probably every few years or so is a good time to go back and get a new professional bike fit. And if you change brands often, or you're going more from a gravel bike you were on a traditional kind of road bike, or hardtail to more full suspension trail bike, they're all a little different and they're all kind of set up a little bit differently.
Yeah. So summing up, bodies change, and of course the industry has changed and our understanding of cycling changes. If your fit is not current, it's time to get current.
Get current, absolutely. And it feels really great when you're just like, oh my gosh, I love this bike. If it's a way to personalize it to you and you get on, you're like, oh my gosh, this is my bike, and it really fits you.
I haven't got a fit, I think probably in 5 years. I'm going to go get one.
Awesome.
All right. A to-do coming out of the questions for the Queen for Fatty. Reba, thanks so much for answering a few of our questions.
Thanks for having me again.
Hottie, when's the last time you got a bike fit? Any big changes?
It's been a while, probably 2 years. The adjustment's always minor, though, with me. Usually saddle height, fore and aft position. I have this imbalance that forces me to ride on my right sit bone a little more than my left. And I'm constantly battling that and trying to straighten it out with fit. But mostly I just head to the gym and, work on muscle balance better.
So who do you think has an edge at this race this year? Youngsters or oldsters?
Well, old or young, those with experience, especially Leadville experience, but those with experience racing, I believe, have the advantage. Take a guy I know who kind of helped me get started in the Leadville 100. Take Nate Whitman, for example. He actually helped Reba win her first LT 100. He has like 15 finishes. He's well into his 40s. He continues to crack the top 15. He told me last summer, after another Leadville in the low 7s and a 9th place overall, that his continued success there at Leadville is all about knowing what to do and when to do it.
You know what's kind of funny about Nate? He and I started doing Leadville together, and we actually rode most of Leadville together, trying to crack into a sub 9 together. Obviously I'm where I am with, working on sub 9s is still a grand thing for me, and I'm always happy when I do. And he's an hour faster than I am now. But it's kind of funny and, kind of a cool thing. It's like, hey, this guy I used to ride with is now an extremely fast guy. It's kind of cool to see your friends rocket forward in the standings. So, all amazing prodigy racers aside, the whole age thing's kind of interesting to me because this is going to be my 22nd start, of course. And I often think back to how different of a rider I am in practically every way than when I did this in my early 50s. I'm really glad I picked a sport where I can keep getting faster and faster into my middle age. If my now self could meet and race my then self, I would beat that punk by about 2 hours myself. That said, I would be jealous of the fact that he has more hair than I do. And I would warn him, start Rogaine now before it's too late. And I'd probably also tell him to lay off the late night snacks. Your metabolism's going to change, kids, in the next couple of years. Don't hit the carbs so hard.
It's been really great having ENVE as one of our show supporters, but not only do we count them as a sponsor, they are also a terrific technical resource. Fatty recently had Jake Pantone and Mark Curry of ENVE over to his man cave / recording studio to talk about what is indisputably, I should say, the most important part of your bike, your wheels.
Yeah, I didn't even try to ask them to be objective. They're with ENVE, after all. They're a big sponsor of the show. Of course, we're going to talk in a positive light about their wheels. I think it's worth pointing out, though, that last episode, Jonathan Lee, who has no connection to ENVE, also endorsed the same wheels I'm using. And for what it's worth, I went to ENVE asking them to sponsor this show because I love their wheels. I didn't go to any other wheel manufacturer asking for sponsorship for this podcast because, frankly, there's no other brand of wheels I want to ride.
Also, these guys are fast and they ride all the time. They bring both deep technical and racing knowledge to the subject. So they're worth listening to no matter what kind of wheels they use.
Yeah, we went for a ride after recording, and they absolutely crushed me without even trying on my home trails. And I was riding a bike 15 pounds lighter than theirs. So let's just say we encourage you, before we dive in, check out enve.com. That's ENVE.com. And with that, we'll bring in Jake Pantone and Mark Curry of ENVE.
Jake Pantone, welcome. Mark Curry, welcome. It's great to have you. I should say, welcome to the Leadville podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
And you have each done Leadville before. Mark, one time, right?
One time. Yeah,
and that was enough for you?
For now. We'll get into it. I have a bit of a bone to pick with my experience at Leadville, but so I'm sure I'll be back. But
okay,
yep.
Okay, we'll get into bones and the picking thereof in a second. And Jake, you've raced it as well.
I have, yes.
How'd you guys do? Before we get into this, so that I know how legit your observations are.
Yeah, so I raced it in 2015. Mm-hmm. Had some lofty expectations, and that's where the bone to pick comes from. But ended up doing pretty well. I think I rolled in about 7.5 hours.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's all right. So we were going to go on a ride before, then that ride is canceled, or at least I get a 20-minute head start. How about you, Jake? You remember?
Yeah, I do remember. I had some lofty goals when I arrived there as well, and I too finished in 7 hours and 40 minutes, I think.
Wow.
Just under.
So we were close.
Yeah. I did it like 20 years before you did. Yep. No, I did it in 2007. So, Mark probably placed like 150th at 7.5 hours, and I was, 30th or something, 40th.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you interview people to join ENVE, do you say like first, are you really fast? Is that a job requirement?
No, they usually just quit because we make them go on bike rides. So if they're not fast enough, then they just quit. And
there's sort of a self-selection.
Yeah, thrown right in at the deep end.
No, ENVE just attracts, people that love to ride their bikes. So that's really the...
no question. I mean, I haven't ever joined you guys on one of your famous lunch rides, but now I don't want to.
You brought the lunch ride to you today.
That's right. That's right.
We've been getting heated as of lately, so see how today goes.
So I have 3 simple questions for you guys, and I want you to. I know ENVE does wheels for all kinds of riders, but I want you to think about the kind of rider who is going to be doing the Leadville 100. Endurance cyclists on terrain that isn't necessarily hyper technical, but certainly has a lot of embedded rocks, a lot of decomposed granite, a lot of rutted lines. And let's talk about wheels, tires, and air pressure. Three easy things.
Those
Mark,
are our favorite topics. Yep.
Yeah. So, of course, you guys are with ENVE, and so I am going to assume that if someone is going to go with a wheel set that is an ENVE wheel set, it's going to be the 525 for Leadville, right?
It would be.
That is
exactly.
That is what I have on my own bike. For folks who are looking at having to ride with the bike that they have, what adjustments or what would you say is important, what is good, and what is critical for a wheel set?
I think you want it to be something that's relatively high volume, so you can run. We'll get to the subject tire pressure, but so you can run pretty low tire pressure. As you know, at Leadville, there's a lot of kind of washboard sections.
Yeah.
And I think that high volume and low pressure is going to be pretty key for that kind of thing, just to keep you comfortable and keep you less fatigued. And again, with embedded rock and the infamous power line descent, trying to prevent flatting and pinch flatting for sure is going to be pretty important.
How about you, Jake? What would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're biased towards that wheel set, the 525, but sure. I mean, it was specifically designed for cross-country racing and long-distance racing. So there's the comfort element that Mark alludes to with regards to, your tire pressure and the volume. Then there's also just, things to consider that we've considered specifically with that wheel, and that, that wheel is designed specifically to have a lot of energy absorption qualities to it. So as you're going over rough sections of trail, it's flexing and absorbing that energy in a way such that the goal is not to transmit that energy, as little of that energy to you, the rider, as possible. And then also just when you're looking at a race of that distance, and that the day's hard enough as it is, so you don't want to be questioning your equipment in any way, shape, or fashion. That goes from your wheel set to your tires to everything else you bring with you. And so, I mean, if anybody preparing to go do that race should have utter confidence in the wheel set they're riding. And for us, when we design a product, that's exactly what we're hoping to deliver to the rider is, we have this idea of true confidence where it's like, the last thing I want to worry about when I'm descending or riding my bike is my wheel set.
Yeah.
And so we really believe in like the experience is so refined that you're not actually thinking about your equipment because you trust it and you just know it's going to be there for you when you need it most.
How much of the wider rim is hype versus is actual value to riders, especially for endurance cyclists?
So a lot has changed in mountain biking over the years, right?
Yeah.
Tire volume has evolved. We used to ride 1.9. I mean, when I was racing cross country regularly, we were doing 1.9 to 2.0 tires. At the end of my very not illustrious career of cross-country racing, where I was my go-to tire of choice was the Schwalbe Racing Ralph, which was a 2.25. And today we're seeing athletes out there on 2.3s fairly regularly. And what we've just learned a lot about volume and what it does for you. And so with a tire casing, the way it's constructed nowadays, you have to have a rim that supports there's sort of an optimal width that supports the casing to prevent tire roll and provide that platform that the tire needs to perform at its best level. The reality is that more volume means better rolling resistance performance and means you're more comfortable and faster over rough terrain.
Taking ENVE out of it, if that's possible, if you were recommending to someone who is racing Leadville, what tire width would you recommend? What rim width would you recommend, and why?
Sure. So I think I'll start with the rim. Something between sort of 23 to 27, 28 internally would be perfect. And a rim of that width would pair up really well with something in the range between 2.2 to 2.3, even up to a 2.4. Do you need a 2.4 at Leadville? Probably not. I think a 2.2, sort of 2.25 is probably what I would go to now.
Front and back?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, interesting.
And probably a low profile, but reinforced tire for sure. I'm one to push a little bit more weight around and try and not flat.
Sure. Then
kind of roll the dice on a super, super lightweight, supple tire that may or may not let you down.
So are you guys allowed to say what tires you would pick if you were to pick a brand, or do you guys try to remain like Switzerland as far as tires go?
Yeah, I can tell you.
Tell me.
Yeah, I'd probably run Maxxis tires for sure. And probably either the Icons or some combination of the Aspen and the Icon. Haven't run Aspens yet, just because I've been on longer travel bikes as of lately, but I think that tire's pretty intriguing, looks pretty fast, and I know they make an exo casing version. All right. And that's probably what I would go to.
How about you, Jake?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been racing cross country, but I'm also a Maxxis tire guy. I mean, when I was racing a lot, I was using Schwalbe Racing Ralph, but again, it's been 7-8 years since I've really ran that tire consistently, so I don't actually even know what that setup is. But today, I'd probably run an Ardent 2.25 up front and an Ardent Race in the back potentially.
And I know that the reason I wanted to ask you guys isn't necessarily just because you work at ENVE, but I mean, as guys at ENVE, where you are constantly testing wheels against tires, I think that you have a good sense of what combinations do work. And with that in mind, I do want to know a little bit about where would you go as far as air pressure and what kinds of sealant do you guys use?
So I guess air pressure, I'd probably go a little bit lower than what most people would expect. I typically would run, on something like a 25 millimeter internal rim, like our M525 and 2.2. I'd probably run about 20 up front, 21 in the rear.
Okay. What do you weigh?
About 155.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's important to know, right? I mean,
yep.
That's an aspect of it. So just for ranges. So with that in mind, for someone who weighs 10 pounds lighter, say, and, let's say 25 pounds more, how would you adjust that?
I think a good formula that I've always used is to take your body weight and divide it by 7.
Oh, really?
And then
that's cool.
That gives you a PSI, and you can either add or subtract a PSI or 2 from there. But that gives you a really good starting point.
Actual math. So a pound or 2 heavier in the back. And
yeah, that's what I do. I don't know if everybody out there does that, but
I do. But mostly
I find that to be a good
superstition.
thing. Yep.
How about you? Do you use the divide by 7, Jake? Or you look like this is the first time you've heard this.
No, I have heard it. It's important to note that only the equation only works for mountain bike application for the most part.
And
we are
with
talking
this
about
particular rim and tire size.
So, I mean, the reality is that for every rim width change, so you can, if you're, you could take the same tire and say it's a 2.3. A 23 internal rim, a 25, a 27, you're going to have to adjust your tire pressure based on each one of those rims because your volume is changing.
Right.
Yeah, me personally, I'm running, again, similar to what Mark's running in the low 20s is what I'd be running on that particular setup, and we're about the same size and weight and everything. But what we've done to tire pressure is a huge part of the equation. And one of the things a lot of people don't understand is they are upgrading to these, they're going from 19 millimeter internal rims or even 17s in some cases. Like that old XC we used to make was a 17.5 millimeter internal rim. And when I was running that wheel, it was, I was running probably 30 PSI in the back and 27 up front or something like that. It's really important that people understand as you go up in tire volume, as you go up in rim volume, your pressures need to come down. And that's across all disciplines of sport, even in gravel these days, tire pressure is a huge thing. But it's all about the ride performance, right? If you're not running the right tire pressure, your suspension's going to feel off. You're not going to have, the traction and all those things that you need to have a good day at Leadville, for example. And so, one of the things we've done just at ENVE is we've created charts. So if you go to like the website and you're looking at a rim model and a tire volume, you can so we have a chart that has basically the rim widths and volumes across the top and then the rider weights down the other side. And it gives you basically a range that we've identified using not just math, but anecdotal sort of within the building on different terrain. We've compiled a bunch of tire pressure data from our athletes and then our test riding, a team of test riders that are outside the building as well as everybody inside the building, just to sort of see where their pressures are. And then we've correlated it to some actual math. We put out a recommendation of say like, if you're running a 2.25 tire on a 25 millimeter rim and you weigh 180 pounds or whatever, here's a good starting pressure. And then you should adjust up and down from there. Nice. Me personally, I like to hit my tire. I like to bottom out. If I bottom out my tire on my rim once or twice a ride, I kind of feel like that's probably as low as I want to go.
Wow. I guess I have been riding long enough that I am terrified if I ever feel my rim touch the tire. If I feel it bottom out one time. But I mean, you're building wheels that can take that, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean the wheels can take it, but it's just sort of this idea, specifically with tire pressure, where you're really trying to find that balance of like how little tire pressure can I run without the tire feeling squirmy, and without like without it feeling like it's rolling over on you, and then of course you don't want to pinch flat it. So.
Right. So we'll definitely link to that in show notes, but people can find that from envy.com.
Yeah.
Sweet.
For sure.
Okay. So how about sealant? You guys got a favorite as far as that goes, or do you just use whatever gets?
We've tried a lot of sealants, and I don't know. I think the shop favorite right now is probably the orange seal product.
Definitely. I've seen orange seal things that I did not think was possible.
No kidding.
Yep.
And we've seen other sealants not seal things that you thought should have been easily sealed. So, but we're not sponsored. We're not.
Oh yeah.
We just
we bought it, put it in our own wheels recently. So
yeah. I'm asking you as a couple of guys who ride a lot and are pretty dang fast and who think more about the rolling part of a bicycle than most people do. So yeah, I understand that this is not an ENVE endorsement. This is me talking to Jake and Mark. So any final ideas or thoughts for cyclists who are racing the Leadville 100? What would you encourage anyone to do who is about to do this race?
Check that your sealant's topped up. If you installed new tires, make sure you got at least a couple ounces in there. You're not going to be kicking yourself for dragging around a little bit extra sealant for the duration of the day. But if you don't have enough, you certainly will be. And then just make sure you've got packed everything you think you do. Tube, tire levers, CO2, frame pump if you're into that. Maybe some tire plugs. I haven't experimented too much with that, but they're certainly interesting.
I have them. And have played with them in the garage. I have not had to use one yet. Maybe that's just something about the fact that I have 525s on 3 bikes, and so far, no pinch flats this season. So that says something, right? Yep. I'm plugging your product for you.
Yeah, shameless plug.
But you guys are sponsoring the podcast. You get to plug it.
But I mean, that's to that point, like when you're considering your wheels, like pinch flatting is one of the main problems we've tried to solve with the M series. And so just to explain a little bit why you haven't had pinch flats, and, the 525 and our 6 series wheels have what's called the wide hookless bead, which is a broad platform that's specifically designed to absorb energy. And so when you bottom that tire out on the rim, the likelihood of pinch flatting is reduced, at least from our testing, by about 50%. But what that's actually equated to in the real world is anecdotally a lot like what you've said. Like, you haven't had a pinch flat yet. In our experience, we haven't had any pinch flats yet. There's certainly been a few guys that have, like some of our World Cup guys have. Sure. But they've also, one of the cool things that they've been able to do is over the years, they've gone from basically a snakeskin protected sidewall, which is, they were a Schwalbe team for quite some time. And they've now gone back down to the lightweight casing tire. So they've been able to take weight out of the tire as well. We've delivered a lighter rim that has this anti-flat technology, and then they have now been able to go down in tire weight as well. So the overall performance package is really sort of elevated compared to where we were before. But back to your question, like preparing for Leadville. Yeah. I think, obviously your physical preparation is super important, but I think oftentimes people put a little too much emphasis on the training aspect of doing a long distance endurance race, and maybe sort of don't put enough focus on the packing the essentials that you need to have success on race day, like preparing for the unexpected is where I'm going with that. And then of course the nutrition thing, like I've preached this for quite a while for whatever it's worth, but I've done a lot of, races and events that are over 6-7 hours. And, I've found me personally that, as long as you have the decent sort of amount of training and base miles in, then anything over 5-6 hours is all about your nutrition and getting your nutrition right. And on the equipment side, it's, don't show up to Leadville with old ratty tires. If you show up when you do put new tires on, put sealant in them, get them set up, not the night before the race or, but make sure you have like at least a couple rides on them, and then make sure you top the sealant off, because some tires out there will absorb all your sealant into them, and then you go out and you get a flat and you're like, it's not sealing, and you open it up and it basically dries the bone. So, you definitely make sure you want to have the sealant levels, like Mark said, topped off. Yeah. If you have new tires. And then it's just all the other stuff, like make sure your cables, make sure your brake pads are good. Just take anything that you would potentially be worrying about, or like they'd be compromising your experience on that day, out of the equation by replacing, $50 for brake pads, $100 for tires. Like, get your stuff set up and in good working condition before you show up.
Yeah, for whatever your A race is. And, for Leadville 100, since this is the event that we care about right here, right now, you spent your whole season getting ready for this race. It is so frustrating to have it end or at least get seriously degraded because you didn't check something. Guys, great product. Great talking to you. Come back to Leadville. Let's race. I want to see you break that 7 hour. I think
we need to go back. Yeah, we both have unfinished business there. That's
Team Envy.
Yeah, maybe not this year.
I like it.
Take all that dirty cons of fitness and put you out front, and we'll just draft off of you.
We're still in a fitness cave from that, so we'll work our way out of that very slowly.
Fantastic, guys. Thanks for joining me in the Leadville podcast.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Any big takeaways from that, Hottie?
Oh, yeah. First, I guess I need to try some Maxxis Aspens. I think even Jonathan endorsed those tires.
Same tires.
Yeah, I run an Arden up front right now, an Arden race, so it sounds like the Aspen's hooking up nicely as well. One thing about pressure, if you're on a full suspension bike, what did the guys ride, by the way? The two guys from ENVE, what did they ride?
Oh, I didn't pay attention to what they were big hit mountain bikes with 27
They were that far in front of you, you couldn't tell. Okay, well, if you're on a full suspension bike, you might be able to get away with actually a little less in the rear than what the calculation may turn into. Mm-hmm. I did that divide by 7 thing, and my number is about 23 to 24 PSI, and I run about that. A little less up front maybe, and maybe a little bit more than that in the rear. So I'm right in the sweet spot there. The wider rim, more volume that you heard the guys talk about, absolute truth there. Look, you can put a big tire on a narrow rim. I've done it. I put a 2.35 on like a 20 mil rim, but the tire would just wallows in corners. So if you have rims that are under 23 mil, say, this is just an example, that would be the internal width of that rim. I would say, stick with a tire that's like 2.20 or less. Don't try to squeeze a big tire on a small rim. I don't think you'll be happy with the results. There's an understandable urge regarding tires to go with the lightest, fastest tire possible. Look, I've raced that way. I don't know if I was lucky or what, but I escape puncture every time. However, if you have a tendency to get flats, if you ride hard, I would say go with a tire that has extra protection. Mm-hmm. You heard the boys mention EXO for Maxxis. It's Snake Shield for Schwalbe. Controls for Specialized. And the other companies have them too, Fatty.
Yeah. The maxim for all of this is no matter how fast your tire rolls, it's still going to take more time than that to fix or repair that tire. So for Leadville in particular, there's a lot of embedded rocks and a lot of people get flats. Don't be foolish. Get something that's not going to flat out for you.
So we're going to ride, Fatty and I, Crusher in the Tusher pretty soon, and I'm giving serious consideration to doing that race with my new Banjo Brothers frame bag.
Oh, cool.
Might look a little weird out there. Everyone's kind of slick and cool and trying to ride fast, and I think I'm going to put a frame bag on. Look, pretty sure I want to carry an extra tube, my phone. That will make for some tight living quarters in those 3 jersey pockets. So why not go with a frame bag instead?
Yeah.
And if I do that, that means I can wear like a loose jersey, So keep the air moving under my skin. No reason to have the jersey pockets. And I'll just put all my stuff, my tube, my extra tube, my pump, my multi-tool, all my food or the food I plan to carry to the next aid station in my Banjo Brothers frame bag. It's what they call a half frame bag. Really, it kind of covers a third of your frame bag. And Fatty, did I hear you correctly last show saying you might go with a top tube bag?
I've kind of got some pride issues with that. It's not easy for any non-tri geek to put a top tube bag on a bike, but yes. I know that my wife uses one and she likes it. And I'm thinking about it. I mean, she is able to get to all of her gels super easy and super fast, and I'm a little bit jealous. And the Banjo Brother ones are very nice and well considered, well conceived. And so, yeah, I might use those for Breck Epic as well as for Leadville too. One thing I have been using lately, just in the last week, for every ride is my Banjo Brothers phone wallet. And there's a little story behind the why on that. It's a marriage-saving measure, actually, Hottie. When I went riding with the ENVE guys last week, I put my phone in my jersey pocket, and apparently Jersey dialed my wife, who was at work, 13 times.
Oh, no.
You know, she's out there working with patients, and she's getting call after call from her husband, who is, you know, and it's just, you know, the phone rattling around in his jersey while he's out, you know, mountain biking during working hours. I'm not sure why that was possible or how that's possible. I certainly don't ever dial her while my phone's in my, you know, in my pants pocket, but it was happening. It definitely is true. So I know
get a Banjo Brothers wallet, folks, at the very least. It'll prevent unexpected calls to your wife while you're out having fun.
Yeah.
She is working. Look, Banjo Brothers, tough, practical, and affordable, Minneapolis-based, in business since 2003. And get that 15% discount off your order. Go to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites.
Yep.
And now it's time for training tips with Jonathan Lee of trainerroad.com as well as MTB Podcast. Jonathan, welcome back.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks, Eldon.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about getting through setbacks. As you can tell from my voice, right now I am coming back from a cold. It's kept me off my bike for a week. Not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, but I know that you, Jonathan, are dealing with a pretty serious setback of your own. And Hottie, a good friend of yours, has dealt with a setback. Hottie, tell us a little bit about that with Sean.
Well, this is just more an interesting story. It's not a setback you can come back from, but I thought it was worth showing people how things can just happen. A good buddy of mine, we were training together. I was helping him get ready for his first Leadville. I was actually helping two guys, and he was going really fast. I mean, he was gunning for sub-8, and he was looking really, really good. Now, this buddy of mine, he likes to train to extreme, and he does everything to extreme. And he was away out of town for a weekend, and he was on the floor stretching his quads. And he was doing what they call a figure 4 stretch, and he stretched so hard that he gave himself a spiral femur fracture.
Oh, my goodness.
He broke his own leg.
Holy cow.
While doing a stretch. It was so loud the whole house heard it. Now, that clearly put him out of Leadville. There was no coming back from that.
Yeah.
He did get surgery, and he's now back riding again. He's done Leadville twice since then. But that's a crazy story, Fatty. And there's really no coming back from that.
Yeah, first tip, don't do that.
Holy cow.
So mine might be something that is perhaps more common and perhaps more addressable. When you have a minor injury or an illness, Jonathan, obviously that sort of throws a wrench into your training plans. What is the coach's advice for coming back and getting back on track?
Yeah, the worst thing you can do is usually the first inclination for us type A driven athletes to double down and to not miss any of the work that we missed. So we go into this makeup work mode, and that's not good.
Yeah.
That's not what we should do. Your body can only take so much amount of stress within a certain period of time, and if you try to double up to make up for lost time, it's not going to work out well for you. Another thing to understand is that your body needs to have stress added to it in a trending manner. So basically, you can't just go 1 week to the next and completely add on a bunch of stress, and then the prior week had no stress and expect to just have things on course. So your body's going to react probably adversely to a huge change in stress like that. So something to keep in mind. Let's take example illness. If you're ill, you are not really recovering. That's something for you to remember. If you're laying down on the couch and you are sick, that isn't the same as laying down on the couch when you are well after doing a hard ride. your body is working overtime to make sure that it can heal from whatever that illness is. The same mechanisms that are in place to help you heal from a sickness are the same ones that help you recover and get stronger after a training session. So it's distracted, basically. So if you you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you really need to make up for lost time, don't worry about it. The best advice is to usually, if it's a matter of a week or two, start where you left off. Continue with that, but also carry a big grain of salt with you and know that you may not be up for the type of training that you were doing prior to that. Sickness takes its toll, and a small cold can have huge effects on us. So, if you need to backpedal in your intervals, for example, or take a short break and make the longer intervals, cut them in half or cut them in smaller chunks. Or if you need to chop an interval off, do that. Or if you need to just bail on a workout, do that, because if you let pride get in the way and you push yourself too deep, you're certainly not going to recover in time for that event, especially considering how close we are to it. So really, the guiding principle here is to be conservative and to know that this isn't something where you can just jerk your fitness around and move it into the spot that it needs to be, but it's something that you have to skillfully and carefully bring up gradually over time. So if you do have a situation like that, take your time. Don't rush.
How about for injury? I think, Jonathan, I don't know if you've talked about this in your own podcast, but you've had pretty much a season-ending injury of your own. And so Leadville's no longer on your personal table. But suppose if it were a less serious knee injury and you were going to come back perhaps, well enough that you could still train for it. What would you do then?
Yeah, injury is there are similar principles that you have to be conservative and you have to respect the injury that you currently have or recovering from. That's a very key thing. Don't think that you're better than the injury and don't think that you can just push right through it. Respect doctor's orders and take it in stride. A handful of folks may be paid that are listening to this podcast to race Leadville, but chances are the rest of us are not paid. In fact, we're paying probably quite a lot to do it. So in that case, don't set yourself up for failure by pushing yourself too early from an injury. The biggest thing that I find when coming back from an injury is that people misunderstand that their body changes and compensates a lot of the time when you're coming back from those. If you have like an overuse injury to your knee, or you have a hip injury, or insert any number of different things, your body is amazingly adept at adapting and finding a way to operate, but in a subpar manner because of that injury. So make sure that you keep up on the simple stuff that you do to maintain, whether that's pedal drills on the bike, whether that's positioning, drills or things that you do to remind yourself to sit properly on the bike. If that's something where you do it off the bike, like core training, make sure you keep up on that. An injury in terms of anything that you've done for connective tissue, bones, anything like that, that's not a time to just sit back and completely relax. You can maybe double down on certain things that won't cause a whole lot of stress on your body, but will allow you to properly recover. Maybe you're doing certain exercises that really aren't cardiovascularly demanding, but they just reestablish neuromuscular firing patterns that help you ride your bike properly. Plenty of different things. So, same principles, conservative, but look at that as an opportunity. If your immune system isn't wrecked from a sickness, maybe it's a good opportunity to fortify your weaknesses elsewhere.
Good thought. Just if you don't mind talking at a personal level, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, so I've had a knee injury that I've dealt with for 4 years now. I've only been riding bicycles for 5.5, I guess. So I guess 6 years. So it's been tricky to deal with, and it's an overuse injury. A lot of people would call it IT band syndrome. A lot of people would call it patellar, femoral syndrome, and plenty of different things. But the long and short of it is I don't operate, I guess, correctly, and thusly I get overuse injuries. So it's something that, and I know a lot of people listening to this have probably gone through something like this, and maybe you have it beat, maybe it's come back to haunt you, maybe you don't have it beat, and I simply don't have an answer on how to fix it. You may think you have the answer, and you may very well have it, but once again, these sort of injuries, and you're talking about overuse injuries, you have to treat them with the utmost respect. And that's something that I'm changing now. So that's why I've wiped my calendar clean of bike events, actually, because I really just want to get this thing sorted out. So and I'm approaching it, actually, like I was just saying earlier, not from the strength or flexibility side like is usually suggested with all the doctors I've worked with in the past, but from a neuromuscular side. So we'll see if that ends up paying off. But for now, I'll be taking all the time that I would have been spending on the bike, and I'm spending it doing PT. So full focus to get healed.
Going back to injuries, Jonathan, if you have an upper body injury, or say you've lost some skin in a crash, you've got a collarbone that you're fairly certain you're going to come back from, can the trainer replace or be your tool? Would you advise people to still go hard on the trainer if it's an upper body injury?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can. There are a couple things to remember, though. Collarbones are really common, right? And a lot of people find themselves, so they've got a broken collarbone, so they sit on the trainer and they train. But in most cases, what you're doing there is you're either sitting upright or you're bracing yourself on the handlebars in such a way that, it isn't normal. So it's really common for people that have, collarbone injuries to then get saddle sores or to get, little twinges of pain in their knee or their hip or their ankle, something like that. And it's usually because they're a little twisted or they're not pedaling in the same form that they usually are. So if you are doing that, basically your goal with training on the trainer, if you are injured or coming back from an injury, especially initially, should just be to keep up a certain amount of aerobic conditioning. You are going to lose some, and that's okay. It's nothing that you can really change. But really what that does is that just keeps up the aerobic conditioning to a certain extent. Maybe you won't drop quite as low. It'll also make it, harder to gain weight if you're doing a little bit of work. It can be a great option. The only thing is I would caution people into going as hard as they normally would, but just changing their position, because that position, there are ramifications. Look at bike fit and how that changes everything. So you're essentially changing your bike fit in a way with that. So certainly possible. Just proceed with caution.
All right. We are 6 weeks out from the Leadville 100. What should racers be focusing on in their training right now?
It's similar to what we're talking about. These things take time. So last week we were talking about how you'll want to be getting more specific with your training. And I'm going to kind of wrap up actually what we were talking about last week in both respects, in terms of gear and your training. This is absolutely the time to be, finalizing your gear decisions, and you should be doing that because, and I should say it's a good time to do that because your training is getting more specific to what you'll be facing on race day, right? What you may think is fine when you're not, doing the sort of climbs that you would be to emulate what you'll have at Leadville, that may change once you actually get onto climbs that are similar to that. So it's time to refine that. Another thing with this too is huge is your nutrition strategy. This is the sort of thing that a lot of the time it takes a week of training with a specific product to really see the true effects that it has on you, right? So if you are going to be changing anything beforehand, you should be very much into the throes of testing those sort of things so you can have it solidified and get a few weeks under your belt with that final decision. So then you'll really know how you'll react on race day. So specificity.
Yeah, I'll second that. Now is pretty much your last opportunity, the last time you should be thinking about making any changes to your hardware, to your nutrition, to anything. You should be going out on a long ride and locking down what you are going to be doing on race day. Not to send waves of panic down your spine, but race day is sneaking up on us, folks. Jonathan, always a pleasure talking with you. Thanks so much. Once again, Jonathan Lee with TrainerRoad.com, as well as the MTB podcast.
Thanks, Eldon.
Hadi, I learned a ton from this conversation with Jonathan. I think this cold I have been holding on to because more or less I did the opposite of what Jonathan said in today's show. When I was sick, I went out and did a massive double Nebo ride. That won't make a lot of sense to folks who don't know the tour of Utah, but basically it is a 5,000-foot single mountain climb. Go down the other side, turn around, come back up. You can get in around 9,000 feet of climbing in about 45 miles. I'm making a change here. From now on, when I get sick, my training objective will be to get better.
Yes, you got to get over that, fatty. The cold and your training hang-up thing,
Yeah.
It's hard to get better on the bike. Better off getting better in bed. Hey, Fatty, as we put the wraps on this one, we'd like to remind everyone that this podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Music, and the home website, Leadville100podcast.com. Subscribing, rating, and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts helps others who've caught the endurance cycling bug find us.
Yeah, and if you have any ideas or questions for us, head over to the website's comment section. Give us a little piece of your mind. And if you've got a question for the Queen, or for Jonathan, or for us for that matter, leave a voicemail or a text at 719-453-1514. We're also active on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter at Fat Cyclists. We're super active on the Leadville 100 mountain bike participants group, so find us there. And hey, I'm doing the Silver Rush 50. Come do that with me. Details in the show notes.
All right, good luck in your training. Thanks for listening. We'll see you at the finish line.
6 weeks, folks. We're getting close.